This morning, the United States Navy didn't just respond, it locked an entire country out of the global economy. And now any ship that gets too close becomes a target. Any vessel daring to dock at an Iranian port now faces the terrifying reality of the world's most powerful navy hunting it down across international waters. Is the U.S. blockade a peace proposal or a demand for total surrender? Let us know in the comments. Is Iran's regime finished? This is not some limited operation confined to the narrow choke point of the strait. American warships can and will interdict suspect ships anywhere on the high seas, turning the entire global maritime domain into a lethal no-go zone for anyone supporting Tehran's war machine. Yesterday, President Trump's announcement left many wondering about the exact rules of engagement, but now Central Command has laid out the ironclad details in unmistakable terms. Is this the end of the IRGC? How did Tehran's invincible blockade turn into a $435 million daily suicide mission? The blockade is being enforced without mercy or favoritism against every vessel entering or leaving Iranian ports and coastal zones, including those along the Arabian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. United States forces will never interfere with legitimate freedom of navigation for ships simply transiting the Strait of Hormuz to or from non-Iranian ports. Tankers heading to Gulf allies or Iraq can sail freely, but any ship bound for Iranian facilities is now fair game for American interdiction. This is raw power projection at its most decisive, and it marks the moment the United States Navy turned economic pressure into outright naval dominance. The Iranian response has already descended into desperate hypocrisy laced with open threats. But before we dissect their hollow bluster, let us examine exactly how this blockade is strangling the Iranian economy in real time. Iran's entire survival as a regime hinges on sea trade, and that lifeline is now being severed by American carrier strike groups and surface action groups patrolling these waters with overwhelming force. On any given day, Iran exports roughly $270 million in goods and imports around $160 million. Every single dollar of that flow is now at immediate risk of being stopped cold by United States Navy destroyers and frigates enforcing the blockade with relentless precision. Break down the export figure, and the picture becomes even more devastating. $140 million of that daily total comes from crude oil, the regime's economic bloodstream. The remaining portion includes petrochemicals, minerals, steel, and metals worth another $80 million every single day. That means the non-oil sectors of the Iranian economy, the factories, the mines, the steel mills that keep ordinary Iranians employed, are about to grind to a catastrophic halt because their products cannot leave port. Land routes offer only a fraction of the capacity and require months to scale up time the regime simply does not have. The United States Navy is not waiting. Its warships are already on station ready to board, divert, or sink any vessel attempting to defy the blockade. The same lethal arithmetic applies to imports. Last year, Iran brought in $58 billion worth of goods, roughly $160 million every single day. Much of that cargo consisted of critical raw materials that feed Iranian factories. Without those shipments, the production lines stop, workers lose their jobs, and the already fragile domestic economy spirals into chaos. This is the exact pressure point that triggered nationwide protests in January, protests that began as desperate cries over economic mismanagement and rapidly escalated into demands for regime change. Is this the end of the IRGC? How did Tehran's invincible blockade turn into a $435 million daily suicide mission? The government answered those protests with brutal force, killing tens of thousands to cling to power, but the underlying economic wounds never healed. They only festered. If you were the supreme leader of Iran, would you accept the 20-year nuclear freeze to stop the $435 million daily bleed? Type 1 for yes, 2 for no. Now the United States Navy has ripped those wounds wide open again, and this time the pain is arriving on the decks of Arleigh Burke-class destroyers and carrier air wings that can strike from hundreds of miles away. The Iranian regime knows it does not have the luxury of time. Its oil storage facilities hold only 50 to 60 million barrels total capacity, and 60% of that space is already filled. That leaves roughly 20 million barrels of spare room. Iran produces 1.5 million barrels of crude per day. Simple math shows the storage will be completely exhausted in about 2 weeks. At that point, Iranian oil companies will be forced to shut down wells, an irreversible decision that permanently damages extraction capacity by 5 to 10% per well. For a cash-starved regime desperate for every dollar, this self-inflicted wound could prove fatal in the long run. And the United States Navy is the one holding the scalpel. While the economic noose tightens, Iranian officials are lashing out with statements that drip with hypocrisy and barely concealed panic. Their military spokesperson has labeled these United States restrictions illegal, the same regime that has spent years attacking neutral Gulf shipping and even civilian vessels from distant nations like Thailand. The IRGC has launched unprovoked strikes on merchant ships halfway around the world in a blatant attempt to blackmail the international community. Now, when the strongest navy on Earth responds in kind, Tehran suddenly discovers the meaning of illegality. Some Iranian voices are already screaming that a naval blockade equals an act of war. By their own twisted logic, when Iranian forces attack peaceful shipping, it is legitimate resistance. Yet when American warships and carrier strike groups enforce a targeted blockade, it becomes unacceptable aggression. The irony is lost on no one except the regime itself. Iran knows its hypocrisy is obvious, but it has no other card to play. Without oil revenue flowing in, the economic collapse will accelerate at terrifying speed, and the United States Navy is accelerating that collapse with every passing hour. That desperation is driving Tehran to threaten even wider escalation, vowing to turn the economic pressure back on the world by disrupting shipping through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. This narrow gateway at the southern end of the Red Sea sits directly across from the Strait of Hormuz in strategic importance. A significant share of the oil that once flowed through Hormuz is now rerouted through the Red Sea and Bab el-Mandeb toward Asian markets. Above it lies the Suez Canal, the vital artery linking Europe and Asia. Any disruption here would send global energy prices soaring and trigger immediate chaos in international trade. The Houthis, Iran's proxy militia in Yemen, attempted exactly this kind of blockade last year, only to be hammered for 50 straight days by American and Allied air and naval strikes until they backed down. Yet Tehran is now openly boasting that it controls the Houthis and can order them to resume attacks on merchant shipping the moment the United States tightens the noose around Iranian ports. Imagine the scene: United States carrier strike groups already positioned in the Arabian Sea, their decks loaded with fighter jets and armed drones ready to deliver devastating precision strikes the instant Iranian proxies attempt to close another critical sea lane. American destroyers and cruisers patrolling the Bab el-Mandeb would respond with overwhelming firepower, turning any Houthi aggression into a one-sided naval slaughter that echoes the decisive sea battles already unfolding in the Strait of Hormuz. There is another silent player whose interests are now colliding with Iran's survival: China. Nearly all of Iran's oil exports flow straight to Beijing, accounting for roughly 13% of Chinese imports. With the United States Navy enforcing the blockade, the supply line is effectively severed. From Beijing's perspective, the crisis is even larger. Roughly 50% of China's total oil imports depend on the Strait of Hormuz, including massive shipments from Saudi Arabia, Iraq, the United Arab Emirates, Oman, Kuwait, and Bahrain. The United States has been crystal clear. Its warships are targeting only vessels bound for Iranian ports. Every other tanker heading to non-Iranian destinations sails unmolested. It is Iran, not America, that is choking off global oil flows. Just days ago, China applied quiet but firm pressure on Tehran to accept a ceasefire and attend negotiations in Islamabad. Beijing desperately needs stable energy supplies. It consumes more oil than any other nation on Earth. American strategists are counting on that Chinese dependence to force Tehran back to the table, and the United States Navy's visible presence in the strait only strengthens that leverage. The China factor. Will Beijing abandon its ally to save 50% of its energy supply, or will they dare to challenge the U.S. blockade? Would you sign J.D. Vance's brutal 6-point ultimatum, or watch your entire national economy vaporize in 2 weeks? Behind closed doors in Islamabad, the gaps between the two sides remain enormous, yet dialogue continues. Vice President J.D. Vance presented 6 uncompromising red lines to the Iranian delegation. Complete end to uranium enrichment, dismantling of all major nuclear facilities, retrieval of highly enriched material. Full reopening of the Strait of Hormuz without Iranian tolls or interference, a broader regional peace including allies, and an immediate halt to funding for proxy forces such as Hezbollah and the Yemeni Houthis. The United States has shown flexibility on ballistic missiles, but zero movement on proxy funding, or the 20-year freeze on enrichment programs. Iranian negotiators appeared open to discussing the nuclear file, yet they lacked final decision-making authority. The person who could actually approve any deal, most likely the Supreme Leader himself, was not in the room. Vance confirmed he contacted President Trump multiple times during the marathon 21-hour session, while the Iranians refused to make secure calls home, fearing interception. That tells us the delegation could only carry proposals back for higher approval. In the coming days, Tehran may return with a counteroffer or even acceptance, opening the door to a long-term peace agreement that ends the naval confrontation once and for all. Prediction time. Will we see a historic peace deal in Islamabad? Or is the Strait of Hormuz about to explode into a full-scale naval war? What you are witnessing right now is the United States Navy dictating terms in the Strait of Hormuz with a level of dominance that leaves the Iranian regime gasping for air. Carrier strike groups stand ready to turn any escalation into a decisive sea battle. Destroyers and cruisers patrol the choke point with weapon systems locked and loaded. This is not theoretical. It is happening in real time, and the Iranian economy is already feeling the full weight of American naval power. Right here in the middle of this unfolding crisis, I want to ask you directly, with American warships and carrier air wings now enforcing a total blockade while Iranian proxies threaten to ignite the Bab el-Mandebi, do you believe Tehran will finally blink and accept the United States red lines? Or will they double down and drag the entire region into a wider naval war? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now, because your voice matters in this fast-moving story. The water of the Strait of Hormuz continues to flow, but the balance of power has shifted permanently. Ships still move, tankers still load. Yet every Iranian port sits under the shadow of the United States Navy's guns. The regime that once boasted it could close the strait at will is now watching its own economic lifelines being cut by the very force it tried to challenge. Legacy threats and proxy militias cannot match the precision and reach of American carrier-based sea power. The United States is not merely blockading ports, it is reshaping the entire maritime battlefield from the Arabian Gulf to the Red Sea, and it is doing so with overwhelming technological and tactical superiority. Click subscribe now. Don't miss a single moment of this historic journey. Your time is valuable. We promise analyses as sharp as reality itself. Stay vigilant, stay informed. We'll see you in the next video. Disclaimer. This video contains content generated or supported in whole or in part by artificial intelligence. This material is intended solely for simulation, illustration, and entertainment purposes. It does not represent real-world events, nor does it constitute political or military advice or verified information. Certain elements may be fictional, dramatized, or inaccurate. Viewers should not rely on this video as a credible source of information or as a basis for real-world decision-making.